Welcome back to Lee TV. This is Lee Harding. Bill Nye, the science guy, panics that climate change will force Canada to grow food.
The great majority, almost two-thirds of Trump voters say it's not an issue with them personally. Whatever you make of that, that's what they say. It's not an issue with me personally.
I think it really is. If you ask any farmer, any professional in agriculture, the pests and parasites are showing up earlier in the growing season. They're sticking around longer. And this makes farmers have more what we call inputs, more pesticides, more herbicides, more mechanical removal of rogue weeds and stuff. And this is very expensive. And so it'll add to the cost of food. And the other problem is the growing in North America, which is the breadbasket of the world even now. The agriculture in North America is going to have to move north into what would nominally be Canada. And we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the railroads and roads to get food from that area to where we need it around the world. And of course it can be built, but the longer we mess around and not address this problem, the more difficult it's going to be. I claim that the people in rural areas are affected perhaps even more than people in urban areas. And they've been hoodwinked. They've been led astray by this group of like-minded people who feel that the economic effects of getting away from fossil fuels are going to be catastrophic. But that is just simply not true.
There's a lot that's not true, and you can find it on MSNBC. I wrote an article on this last July. Canada wins if the globe warms. Why can't Al Gore be right? Asked my friend as we suffered another bitter Canadian winter. Intolerable Januaries aside, global warming alarmists suggest we should be happy if global warming does not occur. But that may not be the case, especially so for Canadians. A recent scientific analysis says that if climate models are correct, Canada could claim enormous amounts of new geography for cropland before the end of the century. The implications are transformational, not only for the millions of square kilometers that could grow crops for the first time, but also for the direction of scientific research and government policy. In May of 2018, Nature.com published a study entitled Northward Shift of the Agricultural Climate Zone Under 21st Century Global Climate Change. It represented the collaborative work of 6 academics, including some from Canada's Memorial University. The idea was to use models to anticipate what new lands could support crops due to climate change, increasing the number of growing degree days. This represents the sum of degrees Celsius above a base temperature, 5 degrees for most crops, for each day within the frost-free growing season. Small cereals such as oats and barley require 1,200 growing degree days, and this was the threshold used to map up the future frontiers of agricultural land. Averages were taken for 7 different climate models to mark out a map of what areas on average met or surpassed 1,200 GDD by 2099. The results are, well, earth-changing. Worldwide, just 1/4 of boreal areas grow crops, but by the end of the century it could look more like 3/4. In this scenario, the northward reach of arable land could extend north another 400 to 600 kilometers in Russia, Finland, and Western Asia, 900 kilometers in Alberta, and 1,200 kilometers in eastern Siberia. This means an additional 10 million square kilometers could turn to farmland, with 5.1 million of them in Russia and 3.1 million in Canada. The authors also predict transformational effects on local land use in Finland, Sweden, and Kyrgyzstan. Cropland north of the 70th parallel could become reality. If the idea of farming far above the Arctic Circle seems far-fetched, well, it might be. 2 peer-reviewed studies released in 2017 suggest the models have it wrong when it comes to the effects the greenhouse gases have on temperatures. Christie and McNitter's Satellite Bulk Tropospheric Temperatures as a Metric for Climate Sensitivity, published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Atmospheric Sciences, demonstrated that global warming since 1979 was only half of what models suggested it should be. Similarly, Nature Geoscience published Causes of Differences in Model and Satellite Tropospheric Warming Rates by Sander et al. To show that the post-2000 era global warming predicted by climate models just wasn't there. Together, these studies challenge Canada's prevailing perception to climate change and approach to tackling it. The science is neither as settled in its assessment nor as cataclysmic in its implications as many have been led to think. Policymakers and researchers have been too narrow in their focus on predicting climate change's effects and its emphasis on prevention of those effects by limiting fossil fuels. billions of dollars spent on solar and wind energy, carbon taxation, and regulatory burdens on the production, transportation, and consumption of fossil fuels slow economic growth far more than world temperatures. If Canada stopped all industry, had zero agriculture, produced no oil, and no fires ever burned, 98.4% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions would still be there. Yet, if the globe warmed twice as much as climate models suggest, the increase in Canadian arable land would be an area 2 times the size of Quebec. Why does Canada look at climate change with fear and trepidation instead of hope and preparation? The Northward Shift study says if northern regions like Canada want to be ready, there's work to be done. Seasonal precipitation could be less than ideal in many areas, so that winter water storage, summer irrigation, and further development of drought-adapted plants will be necessary to seize the opportunities in many areas. By contrast, on both Atlantic and Pacific coasts, Canada's boreal regions will get more rain during the growing season than they currently do. This is generally helpful, but it will require more measures to control erosion and drainage. If climate change does wipe out agricultural lands in some places, it will make land conversions and food security more important than ever. In this regard, Newfoundland and Labrador provided the study's sole example of a government pursuing a food security policy that includes expansion of agriculture on its territory, currently mainly covered by boreal forests. In 2017, it announced a 5-year plan to double its farmland and increase its food security by at least 20%. Commentator Rex Murphy once quipped, "Vegetables require 2 things, soil and sunshine, and Newfoundland has neither." Yet Newfoundland expects a brighter future and is ready to pursue practical changes to get there. Hopefully, just like the clocks in the province, the rest of Canada will soon follow.